You know what they say about running a family electrical contracting business? It's like keeping a diesel generator running with duct tape and optimism. Some days the current flows smooth, other days everything shorts out, and you're left standing in the dark wondering where the hell it all went wrong. My name is James Tate, and I've been married to Beth for 17 years. 17 years of what I thought was a solid partnership, like copper wire wrapped in quality insulation. Turns out the insulation was rotting from the inside, and I was too busy keeping the lights on for everyone else to notice the sparks flying in my own house. The morning everything started unraveling, I was sitting in my office at Tate Electrical Solutions, going over the quarterly reports with my mother Ruth and sister Connie. Mom's 65 but still sharp as a live wire, and Connie's got that lawyer brain that cuts through bullshit like a good pair of wire strippers. "James, we need to talk about John," Mom said, her weathered hands folding the papers with military precision. "John's my older brother, the golden boy who supposedly handles our commercial contracts, but spends most of his time schmoozing clients at the country club." "What about him?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "He's been padding his expense reports," Connie said flatly. "Nothing criminal, but he's pushing the boundaries. $300 dinners, premium hotel suites when a regular room would do fine." I rubbed my temples. John had always lived like money grew on electrical poles, but this was getting ridiculous. "I'll talk to him." "You need to do more than talk," Mom said. "This company's reputation is built on integrity. Your father didn't build this business, so John could treat it like his personal piggy bank." That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Beth. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. XOXO." The third time this week. I stared at the message, something cold settling in my gut like a bad ground fault. "Everything okay?" Connie asked. "Yeah, just Beth pulling another all-nighter at the hospital." She worked as a nurse supervisor, or at least that's what I told myself during those long nights when her side of the bed stayed cold. I drove home to our suburban split level around 7, the October air crisp with the promise of winter. Our daughters Beau and Bree were in the kitchen doing homework, 15 and 13 respectively, both with Beth's dark hair and my stubborn jaw. "Where's Mom?" I asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Another emergency at work," Beau said without looking up from her algebra. "She said she might not be home until really late." That cold feeling in my gut spread like an electrical fire. I pulled out my phone and called the hospital's main number. "Mercy General, how can I help you?" "Hi, I'm trying to reach Beth Tate in the nursing department. This is her husband." "I'm sorry, sir, but Beth called in sick today. She's not scheduled to work tonight either." The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. "Are you sure? Beth Tate, nursing supervisor?" "Yes, sir." She called in around noon saying she had the flu. I hung up and stared at the kitchen wall, watching my marriage collapse like a house with faulty wiring. 17 years, and she was lying to me about where she spent her nights. The girls were still bent over their homework, innocent of the earthquake happening 3 feet away. I forced my voice to stay level. "I'm going to run some errands. You two okay here?" "Sure, Dad," Bree said. "Mom left money for pizza." Of course she did. Guilt money, probably. I got back in my truck and drove aimlessly through town, my mind racing. Where was she? Who was she with? The questions burned like exposed wires against wet skin. My phone rang. Beth's ringtone. "Hey, honey." Her voice was slightly breathless. "Just wanted to check in. This emergency surgery is taking forever." "Emergency surgery?" I kept my voice neutral, professional, like I was troubleshooting an electrical problem instead of watching my life fall apart. "Yeah, a multi-car accident. 3 patients. I probably won't be home until after midnight." "Rough day. The hospital called looking for you earlier, by the way." A pause, just long enough for me to know she was scrambling. "Oh, that was probably about scheduling. You know how mixed up their system gets." "Probably." I let the silence stretch, waiting to see if she'd dig the hole deeper. I should go. They need me in OR prep. Love you. Love you too. But I was already loving a ghost. The Beth I married wouldn't lie about working late. She wouldn't fabricate emergency surgeries. She sure as hell wouldn't leave our daughters eating takeout pizza while she did God knows what with God knows who. I drove to the hospital anyway, some desperate part of me hoping I was wrong. Her car wasn't in the parking lot, wasn't in the staff garage either. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly what my wife was doing during her late nights at work. 2 weeks later, I had my answer, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The private investigator I hired was a retired cop named Frank Morrison who specialized in domestic cases. Professional, discreet, and unfortunately, very good at his job. The manila envelope he handed me in the parking lot of a downtown diner contained photographs that made my stomach turn inside out. Beth and John, my wife and my brother, in compromising positions at the Marriott downtown. The timestamps showed they'd been meeting there twice a week for the past 4 months. "I'm sorry, James," Frank said quietly. "I know this isn't what you wanted to find." I stared at a photo of them kissing in the hotel lobby, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. They looked comfortable together, practiced, like they'd been doing this for a long time. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked. Based on their body language and the hotel staff I talked to, at least 6 months, maybe longer. The desk clerk recognized them immediately. 6 months. While I was working 60-hour weeks to keep our family business profitable, my brother was screwing my wife in a downtown hotel room. The betrayal hit me like grabbing a live wire with wet hands. Shocking, painful, and absolutely clarifying. "There's more," Frank said, pulling out a small digital recorder. "I managed to get audio from their last meeting." I almost told him I didn't want to hear it. Almost. "But you know what they say about electricity. Once you've been shocked, you develop a healthy respect for the current." I needed to know exactly how much voltage I was dealing with. Beth's voice came through the speaker, slightly muffled but unmistakable. "James is getting suspicious. He asked about my schedule yesterday." John's response made my hands clench into fists. So what? He's too wrapped up in the business to figure anything out. Besides, what's he going to do? He needs me to keep the commercial contracts flowing. "I just think we need to be more careful," Beth said. "Maybe we should cool it for a while." "Are you kidding? Beth, you know how I feel about you, how I've always felt about you." Always? That word hit me like a lightning strike. How long was always? "John, we've been over this. What happened before James and I got married was a mistake." Before we got married. The words echoed in my head like thunder after lightning. They'd been together before Beth and I got married. 17 years ago, she'd chosen me over John, and apparently they'd both been regretting it ever since. "It wasn't a mistake," John said on the recording. "Marrying James was the mistake. We both know you should have chosen me." I clicked off the recorder. I'd heard enough. "What are you going to do?" Frank asked. I looked at the photos again, studying my brother's face. John had always been the charming one, the one who could talk his way into or out of anything. But charm only works when people don't know you're a snake. "I'm going to do what any good electrician does when he finds faulty wiring," I said. "I'm going to cut the power and rewire the whole damn system." That night, I sat in my home office with a legal pad, planning my next moves like I was designing an electrical schematic. Every wire had to connect properly, every circuit had to be protected, and every switch had to work exactly when I needed it to. First, I needed allies, people who could help me expose John and Beth without destroying my daughters in the process. I started with my sister Connie. "Jesus, James," she said when I showed her the photos the next morning. We were in her law office downtown, the city skyline stretching out behind her desk. I knew John was a selfish bastard, but this? It gets worse, I said, and played her the audio recording. Connie's expression went from shocked to furious to calculating in about 30 seconds. That's why she's such a good lawyer. She can process emotional devastation and immediately start thinking about strategy. Okay, she said finally. What do you want to do? Divorce, obviously. But what about the business? John owns 25% of the company. I want him out, completely out, and I want everyone to know exactly why. That's going to be messy and expensive. I don't care about expensive. I care about making sure he can't do this to anyone else. Connie leaned back in her chair, studying me. You're talking about nuclear warfare, James. Once you pull these pins, there's no putting the grenades back together. Good. I want the whole thing to blow up in their faces. She nodded slowly. All right. But we do this smart, legal, by the book. I won't help you do anything that could backfire on you or the girls. Agreed. First step is documenting everything. Financial records, company expenses, any evidence of John using business resources for personal use. If we're going to force him out, we need leverage. I spent the next week digging through company files with the help of Mary and Joanne, our longtime office assistants. Both women had worked for my father before he died, and their loyalty was unquestionable. When I explained what I needed without telling them why, they didn't ask questions. What we found was even worse than I'd expected. John hadn't just been padding his expense accounts. He'd been using company credit cards to pay for his hotel rooms with Beth, charging romantic dinners as client meetings, even billing the company for flowers he'd sent to her at the hospital. That arrogant son of a bastard, Mary said, shaking her head as she handed me a stack of credit card statements. He's been using company money to finance his affair. How much? I asked. Joanne looked up from her calculator. Over the past 6 months? Nearly $8,000. $8,000 of family money spent on screwing my wife. I felt that familiar electrical burn of pure rage, but this time I channeled it into cold calculation instead of hot anger. Mary, I need you to make copies of all of this. Joanne, can you prepare a detailed breakdown of every questionable expense? Of course, they said in unison. And ladies, this stays between us for now. When the time comes to make it public, I want to make sure we have everything documented perfectly. That evening, I was in my garage workshop, trying to focus on rewiring a vintage lamp, when Beth came home. I heard her car in the driveway, heard her heels clicking on the kitchen floor above me. James, you down there? In the workshop, I called back. She appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her scrubs, looking tired and beautiful and completely fake. How had I never noticed how easily she lied? How naturally deception came to her? How was work? I asked, not looking up from the lamp. Exhausting. We had 3 emergency surgeries today, and I had to stay late to make sure the night shift was properly briefed. Another lie. According to Frank, she'd spent the afternoon at the Marriott with John. I wondered if she'd showered before coming home, if she'd washed his cologne off her skin before putting on those scrubs. That's rough, I said, testing the lamp's connection. Perfect current flow, unlike my marriage. I'm going to grab a shower and head to bed, she said. Don't stay up too late. I won't. She started to leave, then paused. Oh, I forgot to mention, my sister's wedding is next month. I know it's short notice, but I already RSVP'd for both of us. Sounds good, I said, though something in her tone made me look up. She was fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger. A nervous habit she'd had since college. Actually, there's one more thing. I hope you don't mind, but I invited John to be my +1 to the rehearsal dinner. Since you'll probably be networking with the other business owners there, I thought it would be nice to have someone to talk to. The lamp in my hands flickered and died. I'd gripped the wire too hard and broken the connection. You invited John to be your date? I asked carefully. Not a date. Just, family. He's been so supportive lately, helping me deal with work stress and everything. Supportive. That's what she called it. Sure, I said. That sounds perfect. She smiled, looking relieved. Great. I was worried you might think it was weird. Not weird at all. In fact, I think I'll invite someone too. Even things out. Oh? Who? I looked directly at her, watching her face carefully. Helena Morrison, John's wife. I think she could use a night out. The color drained from Beth's face like someone had just cut the main power line. Helena? Why would you invite Helena? Same reason you invited John. Family support. She's been dealing with a lot of stress lately, too. Beth's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't think that's necessary. John mentioned she's been having some health issues. Nothing serious, I hope. I don't know the details. Of course she didn't. Because she'd never asked. Because Helena Morrison was just collateral damage in her little love affair with my brother. Well, I said, turning back to the broken lamp, I guess we'll find out at the dinner. The next 2 weeks passed like the calm before a thunderstorm. Beth grew increasingly nervous as the wedding approached, asking subtle questions about Helena that I answered with deliberate vagueness. John, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the trap I was setting, probably assuming his charm and my supposed ignorance would protect him indefinitely. I used the time to gather more intelligence. Frank Morrison introduced me to his wife, Helena, an elegant woman in her early 40s who worked as a museum curator. She had no idea about her husband's investigation into my marriage, and I intended to keep it that way. What she did know was that John had been distant lately, working late, taking mysterious phone calls. I'm worried about him, she told me over coffee at a downtown cafe. He's been so secretive. When I ask about work, he just says everything's fine, but I can tell something's bothering him. Maybe he's planning a surprise for you, I suggested, hating myself for the lie but needing her trust. Maybe. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. James, can I ask you something? Has Beth mentioned anything about John seeming stressed? They work so closely together on those hospital contracts. My jaw tightened. Beth and John didn't work together on anything except destroying my marriage, but Helena didn't know that yet. You know how it is, I said carefully. Beth keeps work and family separate. Of course. Helena smiled, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I'm probably overthinking things. John's always been a workaholic. That's what I used to think about Beth. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I was in my office when Connie arrived with a thick manila folder. Everything you asked for, she said, dropping it on my desk. Financial records, expense reports, credit card statements, and a preliminary analysis of John's potential breach of fiduciary duty to the company. I flipped through the documents, months of evidence, all meticulously organized and annotated. This is perfect. James, are you sure about tonight? Once you detonate this bomb, there's no going back. I'm sure. What about the girls? They're going to be at this dinner. I'd thought about that. Beau and Bree deserved to know the truth, but they also deserve to be protected from the worst of it. I'll be careful, but they're old enough to understand that actions have consequences. Connie nodded reluctantly. All right, but I'm sitting next to you tonight. If this goes sideways, you're going to need legal counsel immediately. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Riverside Country Club, a place where my family had been members for 20 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. John had probably brought Beth here during their affair, sitting in the same dining room where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. I arrived with Helena, who looked stunning in a navy blue dress that complemented her silver hair. She'd been surprised but pleased when I'd called to confirm our arrangement, mentioning that John had seemed excited about the evening. He's been in such a good mood today, she'd said. Almost giddy. I haven't seen him this happy in months. Of course he was happy. He thought he was about to spend an evening with his mistress, while her clueless husband played the role of unwitting accomplice. The dining room was elegantly decorated with white roses and candles, about 40 guests seated at round tables covered in crisp linens. I spotted Beth immediately. She was standing near the bar with John, both of them laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The sight of them together, so comfortable and intimate, sent a surge of pure electricity through my nervous system. But instead of letting it burn me, I channeled it into cold, focused energy. "James!" Beth's voice was artificially bright as she spotted us. "You made it!" She hurried over, John trailing behind her. Up close, I could see the tension in her smile, the way her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her dress. "Beth, you remember Helena," I said pleasantly. "John's wife." "Of course." Beth's smile never wavered, but I saw her eyes flick nervously to John. "Helena, you look lovely." "Thank you." Helena beamed, completely oblivious to the undercurrents. "John was just telling me how much he was looking forward to tonight. Apparently you two have been working on some exciting new projects together." The silence that followed was deafening. Beth's face went pale, and John looked like he'd just grabbed a live wire. "Hospital contracts," John said finally. "Very technical stuff." "How interesting," Helena said. "You'll have to tell me all about it over dinner." I caught my mother's eye across the room. She was sitting with Connie and the girls, watching our little group with sharp attention. When she saw me looking, she nodded slightly. Everything was in position. "Well," I said, taking Helena's arm, "shall we find our table?" Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I'd arranged the seating so that Helena and I were directly across from Beth and John, with my family positioned strategically around the room. Every time John tried to make conversation with Beth, Helena would ask him a pointed question about work. Every time Beth tried to catch John's eye, I would make some comment that forced her attention back to the table. "So, John," Helena said during the salad course, "James was telling me that you and Beth have been spending a lot of time together on these hospital projects. It must be nice to work so closely with family." John nearly choked on his wine. "It's professional, strictly business." "Of course," Helena said sweetly. "Though I have to admit, I've been a little jealous of all the time you spend at the office lately. Some nights you don't get home until almost midnight." I watched Beth's fork freeze halfway to her mouth. She knew exactly which nights Helena was talking about. "The healthcare industry is demanding," Beth said carefully. "Lots of emergency meetings." "I'm sure." Helena turned to me. "James, you must understand. How do you manage when Beth has to work so late?" "Oh, I've gotten used to it," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Though lately I've been wondering if all those late nights are really necessary." The tension at our table was thick enough to cut with a knife. John was sweating despite the air conditioning, and Beth looked like she was about to be sick. That's when I decided it was time to flip the switch. "Actually," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, "since we're all here together, there's something I wanted to share with everyone." I pulled out a small stack of photographs. Nothing explicit, just John and Beth entering and leaving the Marriott Hotel together. I placed them face down in the center of the table. "Helena, I think you should see these." "James," Beth whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't." "Don't what?" Helena asked, looking confused. She reached for the photos. John's hand shot out to stop her, but I was faster. I flipped the first photo over, showing John and Beth kissing in the hotel lobby. Helena's gasp was audible across the room. Several nearby tables turned to look. "What is this?" Helena's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "I hired a private investigator," I said quietly. "These were taken over the past 2 weeks." Helena flipped through the remaining photos, her face growing paler with each image. When she finished, she looked up at John with an expression of absolute devastation. "How long?" she asked. John opened his mouth, but no words came out. 6 months, I said. Maybe longer. Helena stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sound seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet dining room. 6 months, she repeated. Then, her voice growing stronger. 6 months of lies. 6 months of wondering why you didn't want to touch me anymore. 6 months of thinking there was something wrong with me. Helena, please. John finally found his voice. Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been screwing your brother's wife while I sat at home wondering why my husband had become a stranger? The entire dining room had gone silent now. 40 pairs of eyes were watching our table like we were the evening's entertainment. Beth tried to stand, but I caught her wrist. Sit down, I said quietly. We're not finished. James, please, she whispered. Think about the girls. I looked over at Beau and Bree, who were staring at our table with wide eyes. My mother had her arms around both of them, but I could see the confusion and hurt on their faces. I am thinking about the girls, I said. I'm thinking about how they deserve to know the truth about their mother. I pulled out the manila folder Connie had prepared and opened it on the table. Helena, did you know that John has been using company credit cards to pay for his hotel rooms? That he's charged nearly $8,000 in personal expenses to our family business over the past 6 months? Helena looked at the credit card statements I spread across the table, her expression shifting from hurt to fury. $8,000? Flowers for Beth, dinners at expensive restaurants, hotel rooms at the Marriott. I pointed to each charge as I spoke. All of it paid for with money that belongs to our family. You bastard, Helena said to John, her voice quiet. You didn't just cheat on me. You stole from your own family to do it. John finally seemed to find his backbone. He stood up, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You want to air our dirty laundry in public, James? Fine, but don't pretend you're some innocent victim here. You've been neglecting Beth for years, working 60-hour weeks, ignoring her needs, treating her like a piece of furniture. So you decided to treat her like a whore instead? The words came out harder than I'd intended, and Beth flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's enough! My mother's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She'd approached our table without me noticing, leaving the girls with Connie. John, you will apologize to your wife and leave, now. Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Ruth Tate might have been 65 years old, but when she was angry, she could still command a room like a general. You've disgraced this family, stolen from our company, and humiliated your wife in front of 40 people. You have exactly 1 minute to apologize and leave before I call security. John looked around the room, finally seeming to realize that every person in the dining room was staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. His shoulders sagged. Helena, Don't. Helena's voice was ice cold. Don't you dare apologize to me in front of all these people. Don't you dare try to make this about your feelings or your guilt. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury. James, I want copies of all these financial records. I want every receipt, every credit card statement, every piece of evidence you have. Of course. And I want him out of our house tonight. John's face went white. Helena, please. We can work through this. Work through this? Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. John, you didn't just have an affair. You used our family's money to finance it. You lied to me every single day for months. You made me think I was going crazy, that I was imagining the distance between us. She picked up her purse and turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and John, I'm filing for divorce first thing Monday morning. I hope she was worth it. The silence that followed Helena's exit was deafening. John stood there for a moment, looking lost and humiliated, before finally walking out without another word. I turned to Beth, who was crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. Well? I said quietly. Anything you want to say? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry. Sorry for the affair? Sorry for lying to me for months? Sorry for letting John steal from our family to pay for your hotel rooms? Or just sorry you got caught?" "All of it," she whispered. "James, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "No." I stood up, gathering the photographs and documents. "We can't fix this, Beth. Some things, once they're broken, can't be repaired." I looked around the dining room one more time, 40 faces staring back at me, some sympathetic, some shocked, all of them witnesses to the complete destruction of my marriage. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, "I apologize for disrupting your evening. Please, enjoy the rest of your dinner." I walked over to where Connie was sitting with my daughters, both of whom looked like they'd aged 5 years in the past hour. "Dad?" Bu's voice was small and uncertain. "We'll talk at home," I said gently. "Right now, let's just go." As we left the dining room, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up behind us. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know exactly what John and Beth had done. Their reputations would be in ruins, their marriage was over, and John's position in the family business was finished. But as I looked at my daughters' confused, hurt faces, I wondered if the price of my revenge was worth it. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the truck's engine and the occasional sniffle from the back seat. Bu and Bree sat together, holding hands in that way sisters do when their world suddenly doesn't make sense anymore. I kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain that their mother wasn't the person they thought she was. When we pulled into our driveway, Beth's car was already there. She'd beaten us home, probably driving like hell to get there first. I could see lights on in the kitchen and our bedroom upstairs. "Dad," Bree said as I turned off the engine, "is Mom really—" "Let's go inside and talk," I said. "All of us together." We found Beth in the living room, still wearing the red dress, but with her makeup cleaned off and her hair pulled back. She looked younger without the mascara and lipstick, more like the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Girls," she said, standing up quickly. "I know what you saw tonight was confusing, but—" "Sit down, Mom." Bu's voice was steady but cold. At 15, she had her mother's beauty but my stubborn streak, and right now she looked like she was ready for a fight. Beth sat. I remained standing, positioning myself between Beth and the girls, not to protect her from them, but to protect them from whatever lies she might try to tell. "Okay," I said. "Let's start with the truth. All of it." "James, please," Beth said. "They don't need to know everything." "They deserve to know everything," I replied. "They're old enough to understand that actions have consequences." Bree spoke up, her voice smaller than her sister's but just as determined. "Mom, were you really having an affair with Uncle John?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an electrical fire. Beth looked at her youngest daughter, tears forming in her eyes, and I saw the exact moment she realized she couldn't lie her way out of this. "Yes," she whispered. The simple word hit the room like a lightning strike. Both girls flinched, and I felt something hard and cold settle in my chest. "For how long?" Bu asked. Beth glanced at me, then back at the girls. 6 months. "But you've been lying about working late for longer than that," I said. "The hospital told me you called in sick the day you claimed to be doing emergency surgery. How long have you been lying to us, Beth?" Her shoulders sagged. "A year. Maybe longer." "A year." I let that sink in. So while I was working extra hours to keep this family financially stable, while the girls were dealing with school and growing up and needing their mother, you were sneaking around with my brother. "It wasn't like that," Beth said desperately. "It just happened. John and I, we have history, and when we started working together on those hospital contracts—" "What history?" Bu interrupted. Beth went pale. She looked at me pleadingly, but I just stared back at her. She'd opened this door. She could walk through it. John and I dated before I met your father, she said finally. Dated? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tell them the truth, Beth. Tell them you were engaged to John before you married me. The girl's eyes went wide. This was news to them, news I'd only learned from the private investigator's recording. You were engaged to Uncle John? Bree asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a long time ago, Beth said. We were young. It didn't work out. I met your father and fell in love with him instead. But you never stopped loving John, I said. It wasn't a question. Beth was crying now, ugly tears that made her nose red and her eyes puffy. I loved you, James. I do love you. But John and I, we have a connection that... That what? That justifies lying to your husband and daughters for a year? That justifies stealing money from our family business to pay for hotel rooms? Stealing money? Bew looked confused. I pulled out one of the credit card statements and handed it to her. John used company credit cards to pay for his affair with your mother, $8,000 over 6 months. Bew studied the statement, her expression growing darker with each line item. Mom, you knew about this? I didn't ask him to pay for anything, Beth said weakly. But you didn't stop him, I said. You didn't say, John, this is wrong. We can't use your family's money to finance our affair. You just let him do it. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Beth crying. I looked at my daughters, trying to gauge how they were handling this. Bew looked angry, her jaw set in that stubborn way she'd inherited from me. Bree looked lost, younger than her 13 years. What happens now? Bree asked quietly. Now your mother and I get divorced, I said. And John is out of the family business permanently. What about us? Bew asked. Where do we live? Who do we stay with? I looked at Beth, who was staring at her hands. That depends on what your mother wants to do. Beth looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. I want to stay. I want to work this out. James, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but this is our family. These are our children. We can go to counseling, we can... No, I said firmly. Beth, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for a year, you chose to lie to me and the girls. You chose to sneak around with my brother. You chose to let him steal from our family to pay for your affair. So that's it? She asked. 17 years of marriage, and you're just throwing it away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already threw it away. I'm just acknowledging that it's gone. Beth stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Fine. You want to play the victim, James? Go ahead. But don't pretend you're innocent in this. You think working 60 hours a week makes you a good husband? You think providing financially is all a marriage needs? I think not screwing your husband's brother is a pretty basic requirement, I shot back. Girls, go to your rooms, Beth said sharply. No, Bew said, crossing her arms. This affects us too. We have a right to hear this. Your daughter's right, I said to Beth. They're old enough to understand that you're trying to blame me for your choices. Beth's face twisted with frustration. You want to know the truth? The real truth? John makes me feel alive in a way you never did. He pays attention to me. He listens to me. He makes me feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. And that justifies everything you've done? It explains it. No, it doesn't. Bew stood up, facing her mother. Mom, Dad works hard to take care of us. He's never missed one of my soccer games or Bree's piano recitals. He helped us with homework every night until we got too old to need help. He's been here. And where have you been? Bree added, her voice growing stronger. Half the time when we needed you, you were working late or dealing with an emergency. But you weren't working. You were with Uncle John. Beth looked stricken. Girls, you don't understand. Marriage is complicated. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes they find connection with someone else. Sometimes people lie and cheat and steal, I said coldly. Let's call it what it is, Beth. She whirled on me, her eyes blazing. You want to destroy me, don't you? You want to turn my own daughters against me. I don't have to turn them against you. You did that yourself. The truth of that statement seemed to hit her like a slap. She looked at Beau and Bree, both of whom were staring at her with expressions of disappointment and hurt. I need some air, she said finally, grabbing her purse and keys. Where are you going? I asked. I don't know. Maybe to John's. Maybe to a hotel. Maybe I'll just drive until I run out of gas. Mom, Bree said, her voice small and scared. Beth paused at the door, looking back at her youngest daughter. For a moment, I thought she might stay, might try to salvage something from the wreckage of our family. Instead, she said, I'll call you tomorrow, and walked out. The sound of her car starting and pulling out of the driveway seemed to echo through the house. The three of us stood in the living room, listening to the engine fade into the distance. Is she coming back? Bree asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Do you want her to come back? Beau asked. I thought about that for a long moment. Did I want Beth to come back? Did I want to try to rebuild our marriage, go to counseling, pretend that the past year hadn't happened? No, I said finally. I don't think I do. Both girls nodded, like they'd been expecting that answer. Are we going to be okay? Bree asked. I pulled both of them into a hug, holding them tight against my chest. We're going to be fine, I said. It's going to be different, and it's going to be hard sometimes, but we're going to be fine. What about Uncle John? Beau asked, her voice muffled against my shirt. What about him? Is he really out of the business? I thought about John, probably sitting in some bar right now trying to figure out how his life had imploded so spectacularly. Part of me almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Yeah, I said. He's out. Permanently. Good, Beau said fiercely. He deserves it. We stood there for a while, the three of us holding each other in the wreckage of our family room. Outside, the October wind was picking up, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the driveway. Tomorrow, I would have to start the process of rebuilding our lives. Divorce lawyers, custody arrangements, restructuring the business, dealing with the gossip and the whispers and the well-meaning friends who would want to know all the details. But tonight, it was just me and my daughters, and for the first time in months, that felt like enough. The next morning brought a steady rain that matched my mood perfectly. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone started ringing. First call was from my mother, then Connie, then Frank Morrison, then 3 different people from the country club who'd witnessed last night's explosion. James, honey, how are you holding up? Mom's voice was gentle but concerned. I'm fine, Mom. The girls are handling it better than I expected. Where's Beth? I don't know. She left last night and hasn't come back. A pause. And John? Also don't know, also don't care. Well, you need to know this. I've called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. John's out, effective immediately. I won't have him stealing from this company or embarrassing this family any further. The Tate family business was structured as a corporation, with Mom holding 40%, me holding 35%, John holding 20%, and Connie holding 5%, which meant John could be outvoted easily, but removing him entirely would require some legal maneuvering. What about his shares? I asked. Connie's working on that. Something about breach of fiduciary duty and moral turpitude clauses in the corporate bylaws. Your father was a smart man. He built protections into the company structure. After Mom hung up, I checked on the girls. They were both awake but still in their pajamas, sitting on Beau's bed and talking quietly. How are you two doing? I asked from the doorway. Okay, I guess, Bree said. Has Mom called? Not yet. Do you think she will? I'm sure she will. She loves you both very much, even if she made some terrible choices. Beau looked up at me with those serious eyes that reminded me so much of her mother. Dad, are you going to try to keep us away from Mom? The question caught me off guard. Do you want to see her? I don't know, Beau said honestly. I'm really angry at her right now, but she's still our mom. And I would never try to come between you and your mother, I said. Whatever happens between Beth and me, that's separate from her relationship with you two. It was the right thing to say, even though part of me wanted to poison them against her, the way she'd poisoned our marriage. But that wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't the kind of father I wanted to be. Around noon, Beth finally called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. James, I'm staying at the Marriott downtown. I know that's ironic, but I need some time to think. Can the girls call me? I want to talk to them. I played the message for Beau and Bree, and both of them decided they wanted to talk to their mother. I gave them privacy for the conversations, but I could hear the tone through the closed doors, hurt, confused, but still loving. Kids are remarkably resilient, even when their parents are busy destroying everything stable in their lives. The board meeting that afternoon was held in our conference room downtown. Present were Mom, Connie, myself, and our corporate attorney, David Chen. John had been notified but didn't show up. All right, David said, spreading documents across the table. Based on the evidence James provided, we have clear grounds for removal. John used company resources for personal expenses, violated his fiduciary duties, and engaged in conduct detrimental to the company's reputation. What does that mean in practical terms? I asked. It means we can force him to sell his shares back to the company at book value, not market value. Given the circumstances, that's probably about 60% of what they'd be worth in a normal sale. And he can't fight it? He can try, but the evidence is overwhelming. Any lawyer would advise him to take the deal. Mom leaned back in her chair, looking older than her 65 years. I never thought it would come to this. When your father started this company, he dreamed of passing it down to his sons together. Dad also built in protections because he knew that family businesses can be destroyed by family drama, Connie pointed out. He was smart enough to plan for this possibility. We spent the next hour going through the legal details. By the end of the meeting, John would be officially removed from all company positions, his access to company accounts would be terminated, and he would have 30 days to respond to our buyout offer. What if he doesn't respond? I asked. Then we proceed with a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty and theft of company resources, David said. But I suspect he'll take the deal. The alternative is much worse for him. As we were packing up the documents, my phone rang. Unknown number. James, it's John. I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. What do you want, John? I want to talk. Face to face. Just you and me. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, I know I screwed up, but we're brothers, family. There has to be a way to work this out. I looked around the table. Mom was shaking her head, Connie was making a throat-cutting gesture, and David was taking notes. There's nothing to work out, John. You're out of the company, you're out of the family, and you're out of my life. James, come on. I know you're angry, but... Angry? I laughed. John, angry is what I felt when you used to borrow my tools without asking. This is something else entirely. Look, I'll make it right. I'll pay back every penny I spent on company cards. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do whatever it takes. What it takes is a time machine so you can go back and not screw my wife for 6 months while stealing from our family business. A long pause. I love her, James. Those 4 words hit me harder than I'd expected. Not because they hurt, but because of how pathetic they sounded. You love her? I said. John, you don't love Beth. You love the idea of taking something that belonged to me. You love the thrill of sneaking around, the excitement of forbidden fruit, but you don't love her. That's not true. Really? Then why haven't you left Helena before now? If you love Beth so much, why didn't you divorce your wife and marry her? Another pause. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's simple. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted the stability of your marriage to Helena, and the excitement of screwing my wife on the side. "James, we're done, John. Lose my number." I hung up and looked around the table. Well, that was enlightening. "He's desperate," David observed. "That's good for us. Desperate people make bad decisions." "Worse decisions," Mom corrected. "He's already made plenty of bad ones." That evening, I was helping the girls with homework when Beth showed up. She looked tired and older, like the past 24 hours had aged her 5 years. "Can we talk?" she asked. "The girls are here." "I know. I want to talk to all of you." We gathered in the living room again, the same configuration as the night before. But something had changed in Beth's demeanor. The defiance was gone, replaced by something that looked like resignation. "I've been thinking," she said, "about everything that's happened, about the choices I've made." "And?" I prompted. "And I know I can't undo any of it. I know I've hurt you all in ways that probably can't be forgiven." Bree shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, let me finish, sweetheart. I need to say this." Beth took a shaky breath. "I want you to know that none of this is your fault. Your father is a good man, a good husband, and a good father. I'm the one who made terrible choices." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. "I'm going to move out," she continued. "Permanently. I'll find an apartment and we can work out visitation schedules for the girls." "What about John?" Bew asked. Beth's face crumpled slightly. "John and that's over too. Helena kicked him out and he's been calling me non-stop, but I can't be with someone who would steal from his own family." Interesting. Even Beth had limits, apparently. "So what now?" I asked. "Now I try to figure out how to live with what I've done, and I hope that someday you and the girls can forgive me." She stood up, smoothing down her jeans. "I'll come by tomorrow to pack some things. And girls, I want you to know that I love you both more than anything in this world. That never changed, even when everything else did." After she left, the three of us sat in silence for a while. "Do you think she means it?" Bree asked finally. "I think she's scared," I said. "Sometimes people don't realize what they've lost until it's gone." "Are you going to forgive her?" Bew asked. I thought about that. Forgiveness was a complicated thing. I could forgive Beth for the sake of our daughters, for the sake of my own peace of mind. But forgetting was different. Trusting again was different. "Someday," I said, "but not today." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork and difficult conversations. John eventually accepted the buyout offer, though not without a fight. He tried to contest the moral turpitude clause, claiming his personal life shouldn't affect his business interests. David Chen made short work of that argument by pointing out that John had used company resources to finance his personal life. Helena filed for divorce and took John for everything she could get, which turned out to be quite a lot. Apparently, she'd been keeping better track of their finances than John realized, and she had documentation of several other questionable expenses over the years. Beth found a small apartment across town and started the process of rebuilding her life. The girls visited her on weekends, and slowly, carefully, they began to repair their relationship. It would never be the same, but it was something. As for me, I threw myself into work and single parenthood. The company was actually more profitable without John's excessive spending, and I discovered I enjoyed the commercial contracts more than I'd expected. But the best part was coming home every evening to my daughters, helping with homework, making dinner together, watching terrible movies on Netflix. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good life. And sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, I would sit in my workshop and think about electricity, about how current always follows the path of least resistance, how circuits need to be complete to function properly, and how sometimes the only way to fix faulty wiring is to tear it all out and start over. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I thought the drama was behind us. Beth had settled into her apartment. The girls had adjusted to the new routine, and John had disappeared to Phoenix, where he'd taken a job with some commercial electrical contractor. Helena had moved to Chicago to be closer to her sister. Life had found a new equilibrium. I should have known it wouldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday morning in February. I was in the office reviewing bids for a hospital renovation project when Mary buzzed me. "James, there's a Helena Morrison online too. Says it's urgent." I picked up the phone, curious. Helena and I had maintained a cordial relationship. We'd been through the same betrayal after all. But we rarely spoke anymore. "Helena? What's going on?" "James, I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. John's back in town." That familiar electrical burn started in my chest. "Since when?" "Yesterday. He showed up at my sister's house looking for me. When she told him I'd moved to Chicago, he started asking about you and Beth." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you two had gotten back together? Whether the business was doing well? Whether there was any chance of him getting his job back?" I leaned back in my chair, processing this. "What did your sister tell him?" "Nothing. She knows better. But James, he seemed different, desperate, maybe even a little unhinged." "Different how?" "Thinner, older, and angry, really angry. He kept saying how you'd destroyed his life, how he'd lost everything because of your revenge." "His revenge," I muttered. "Right. I'm probably overreacting, but I wanted to warn you. I don't think he's done with this." After Helena hung up, I sat staring out the window at the February sleet. John was back, and according to Helena, he was looking for trouble. Part of me almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But mostly I felt that old, familiar anger, the kind that burns clean and bright and doesn't leave room for pity. That evening, I was helping Bree with her algebra homework when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a figure standing on the porch, but the outdoor light was broken, and I couldn't make out who it was. "Stay here," I told the girls, and went to answer the door. It was John. Helena had been right. He looked terrible. Thinner, like he hadn't been eating regularly. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was too long, and there was something wild in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Hello, brother," he said. "What do you want, John?" "Can I come in? It's freezing out here." "No." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Still holding a grudge, I see. Still pretending you're the victim, I see." "Victim?" His voice rose slightly. "James, you destroyed my life, my marriage, my career, my reputation, all because you couldn't handle a little competition." "Competition?" I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. Whatever this was, I didn't want the girls to hear it. "John, you weren't competing with me, you were stealing from me. I was taking what should have been mine in the first place. Beth was never yours. She was engaged to me first. She loved me first. If you hadn't come along with your steady job and your responsible act, she would have married me." I stared at him, finally understanding. This wasn't about love or passion or even revenge. This was about John's lifelong inability to accept that he couldn't have everything he wanted. "So, you decided to take her anyway," I said. "Even though she was married to your brother. Even though it meant lying and stealing and destroying two families. I was correcting a mistake." "No, John, you were making one." He stepped closer and I could smell alcohol on his breath. Not drunk, but definitely drinking. "You know what the worst part is?" he said. "After everything I sacrificed for her, Beth won't even talk to me. Won't return my calls, won't see me. She acts like I'm some kind of monster." "You are some kind of monster." His face twisted with rage. "You turned her against me. You and your self-righteous bullshit, you made her think I was the bad guy." "John, you stole $8,000 from our family business to finance your affair with my wife. You don't need me to make you look like the bad guy." "That money was nothing compared to what I brought to this company. Those hospital contracts, the commercial work, that was all me. Those contracts came through Beth's connections at the hospital. You just took credit for them. Bullshit. Call Mercy General tomorrow and ask them who their primary contact was for electrical work. Spoiler alert, it wasn't you. The look on his face told me he knew I was right. John had always been good at taking credit for other people's work, but he'd never been as indispensable as he thought he was. What do you want, John? I asked again. I want my life back. I want my job back. I want Beth back. Well, you can't have any of those things. We'll see about that. Something in his tone made me take a step back. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not giving up. It means I'm going to fight for what's mine. Beth isn't yours. She never was. She will be. He turned and walked back to his car, a beat-up Honda that had seen better days. As he drove away, I made a mental note to call Frank Morrison in the morning. If John was planning something stupid, I wanted to be ready for it. The next few days passed quietly, but I could feel the tension building like static electricity before a storm. I made sure the girls were never alone, arranged for Mary and Joanne to keep an eye on the office, and had Frank do some discreet surveillance on John's movements. What Frank found wasn't encouraging. He's staying at the Motel 6 on Highway 9, Frank reported. Paying cash, keeping to himself mostly. But he's been driving by your house at least twice a day, and he spent 3 hours yesterday sitting in the parking lot across from Beth's apartment complex. Stalking behavior. That's what I'd call it. You might want to consider a restraining order. Based on what? He hasn't threatened anyone directly. Yet. That evening, I was grilling burgers on the back deck when my phone rang. Beth's number. James, I'm scared. Her voice was shaky, uncertain. What happened? John's been calling me nonstop, leaving voicemails, sending texts. He says he needs to see me, that we need to talk about our future together. Our future? What future? That's what I told him, but he won't listen. He keeps saying that you've brainwashed me, that I don't know what I really want. I could hear the fear in her voice, and despite everything that had happened between us, I felt a surge of protective anger. Have you seen him? He was outside my apartment this morning when I left for work, just sitting in his car, watching. When I came home tonight, he was there again. Did you call the police? What would I tell them? That my ex-lover is sitting in a public parking lot? She had a point. Without a direct threat or some kind of illegal behavior, the police couldn't do much. Beth, I want you to pack a bag and come stay here for a few days. I can't do that, James. We're divorced. It would be too confusing for the girls. The girls would rather have their mother safe and confused than in danger and alone. A long pause. Do you really think he's dangerous? I thought about the wild look in John's eyes, the desperation in his voice, the way he'd talked about fighting for what was his. Yeah, I said. I think he might be. Okay, I'll pack a bag. An hour later, Beth was sitting at our kitchen table while the girls fussed over her like she was a wounded bird. It felt strange having her back in the house, but also oddly comforting. Whatever else had happened between us, she was still the mother of my children, and they needed to know she was safe. So what's the plan? She asked after the girls had gone upstairs. We wait. John's not stupid enough to try anything while you're here. He knows I'll call the police if he so much as sets foot on this property. And then what? I can't stay here forever. We'll figure something out. But as it turned out, we didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when Frank called. James, you need to know, John checked out of the motel this morning, paid his bill and left. But here's the interesting part. He didn't take his car. What do you mean? I mean his car is still in the motel parking lot, but he's gone. Either someone picked him up or he's on foot. That electrical burn started up again, stronger this time. Frank, I need you to come to the house, now. On my way. I hung up and went to find Beth. She was in the kitchen making coffee, looking more relaxed than she had in days. We need to talk, I said. I explained Frank's call and watched the color drain from her face. You think he's coming here? I think he's desperate enough to try something stupid. Should we call the police? And tell them what? That my brother checked out of a motel without his car? Beth set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. James, I'm scared. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Not the doorbell. A hard, insistent knocking that echoed through the house. Stay here, I told Beth, and went to look out the front window. John was standing on the porch, but he looked different than he had 3 days ago. Cleaner, more composed. He was wearing a suit I recognized, one he'd worn to company meetings back when he still worked for us. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. What do you want, John? I want to talk to Beth. She doesn't want to talk to you. Let her tell me that herself. No. James, you need to understand something. I'm not going away. I'm not giving up. Beth belongs with me, and I'm going to make that happen. Beth belongs with whoever she chooses to be with, and she's chosen not to be with you. She's confused. You've manipulated her, turned her against me, but I can fix that. John, you need to leave, now. Or what? You'll call the police? Go ahead. I'm not doing anything illegal. He was right, and we both knew it. Standing on someone's porch wasn't a crime, even if your intentions were less than honorable. I'm going to count to 10, I said. If you're not gone by the time I reach 10, I'm calling 911. 1, 2, 3. John just stood there, smiling that cold smile. 4, 5, 6. You know, James, you always were the responsible one. The one who followed the rules, who did what he was supposed to do. 7, 8. But sometimes the rules don't matter. Sometimes you have to take what's yours. 9. Tell Beth I'll be waiting. 10. John turned and walked away, but he didn't seem hurried or concerned. He moved like a man who had all the time in the world, like someone who knew something I didn't. I watched him disappear around the corner, then closed the door and engaged all the locks. What did he want? Beth asked. She'd been listening from the kitchen doorway. You. What did you tell him? That he couldn't have you. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. James, you don't owe me anything. After what I did to you, to our marriage, you don't have to protect me. I'm not doing this for you, I said. I'm doing it for the girls. They've lost enough. They don't need to lose their mother, too. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But it was easier than admitting that despite everything, I still cared about her. That somewhere underneath all the anger and hurt, there was still love. Damaged, maybe irreparable, but real. Thank you, she said quietly. The rest of the day passed without incident, but I could feel John's presence like a storm system moving in. Frank had positioned himself across the street with a clear view of the house, and I'd called in sick to work so I could stay home with Beth and the girls. Around dinner time, the phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? James, it's John. I motioned for Beth to pick up the extension in the kitchen. What do you want? I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? I want my job back, full reinstatement, equal partnership, and my old salary. I almost laughed. Are you insane? In exchange, I'll leave Beth alone. I'll move back to Phoenix, and you'll never hear from me again. John, you're not in a position to negotiate. You have nothing I want. Don't I? What's that supposed to mean? Check your email, brother. I put the phone on speaker and opened my laptop. There was a new message from an address I didn't recognize, with a video attachment. I clicked play, and my world exploded. It was security footage from the Marriott Hotel, showing Beth and John entering a room together. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the timestamp, last Tuesday, 3 days ago, the night before John had shown up at my door. Surprised? John's voice came through the phone speaker. I looked at Beth, who had gone white as a sheet. James, I can explain. Can you? I asked, my voice quiet. Can you explain why you were at a hotel with John 3 days ago, while you were telling me how scared you were of him? It wasn't what it looked like, she said desperately. He called me, said he was going to hurt himself if I didn't meet him. I went there to talk him out of it. And the part where you went into the hotel room together? He said he had something to show me, something that would explain everything. How long were you in that room, Beth? She didn't answer. How long? 2 hours, she whispered. John's laughter came through the phone like broken glass. 2 hours, James. What do you think we were doing for 2 hours? I felt something snap inside me, like an overloaded circuit finally giving way. The betrayal was complete now, absolute. Not only had Beth lied to me about being afraid of John, she'd been meeting with him in secret. Even after everything that had happened, everything we'd been through, she was still choosing him over me. You know what, John? I said into the phone. You win. James, no, Beth started. You want her? Take her. You two deserve each other. I hung up the phone and looked at Beth, who was crying again. But this time, I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no pity. Just a cold, empty clarity. Get out, I said. James, please, let me explain. Get out of my house. What about the girls? What about them? You made your choice. Again. I was trying to help him. He said he was suicidal, that he needed to see me one last time before he... Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. I don't want to hear any more lies. They're not lies. Beth, you spent 2 hours in a hotel room with the man you claim to be afraid of, the man who's been stalking you. Either you're lying about being afraid, or you're lying about what happened in that room. Either way, you're lying. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, because she knew I was right. I want you gone in 10 minutes, I said. Take whatever you need, but I want you out of this house. James, 10 minutes. She went upstairs to pack, and I called the girls down to the living room. Your mother is leaving, I told them. Why? Bree asked. Because she's been lying to us. Again. I didn't give them the details. They didn't need to know about the hotel room or the secret meeting. But they could see the truth in my face, could hear it in my voice. Is she going back to Uncle John? Bew asked. I don't know, and I don't care. Beth came downstairs with a suitcase, her eyes red from crying. She tried to hug the girls, but they stepped away from her. Mom, Bree said, why do you keep lying to us? I don't... You do, Bew interrupted. You lie about everything. About work, about Uncle John, about being scared. Why can't you just tell the truth? Beth looked at me pleadingly, but I just stared back at her. She was on her own now. I love you both, she said finally. If you loved us, you wouldn't keep hurting Dad, Bew said. Beth's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She couldn't argue, because Bew was right. After she left, the three of us sat in the living room in silence. Outside, I could see Frank's car still parked across the street, keeping watch. Are we going to be okay? Bree asked. Yeah, I said, and for the first time in months, I actually believed it. We're going to be fine. Because the truth was, I was done. Done with Beth's lies, done with John's manipulations, done with trying to salvage something from the wreckage of my marriage. Some things, once they're broken, can't be fixed. And some people, once they've shown you who they really are, don't deserve a second chance. The next morning I filed for a modification of the custody agreement, seeking full custody of the girls. I also had Frank deliver a message to John. If he ever came near me or my daughters again, I would have him arrested for harassment and stalking. 2 weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that John and Beth had left town together, heading back to Phoenix. Apparently, they'd decided to give their love another try, far away from the wreckage they'd created here. I wished them well. Not really, but it sounded good. The girls took it hard at first, but kids are resilient. They threw themselves into school and sports and friends, and slowly the hurt began to heal. We developed new routines, new traditions, new ways of being a family. And me? I discovered that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what really matters. My daughters mattered, my work mattered, my integrity mattered. Everything else was just noise. 6 months later, I was in my workshop rewiring an antique chandelier when Beth came down to tell me dinner was ready. She'd learned to cook over the past year, and she was getting pretty good at it. "Dad," she said as I cleaned up my tools, "do you ever miss Mom?" I thought about that question, really considered it. Did I miss the woman who'd lied to me for over a year? Who'd chosen my brother over our family? Who'd continued lying even after she'd been caught? "I miss the woman I thought she was," I said finally, "but that woman never really existed." Beth nodded like she understood. At 16, she was wiser than I'd been at twice her age. "Do you think she's happy?" she asked. "I think she's getting exactly what she wanted." "And what about us? Are we happy?" I looked around my workshop, at the tools my father had taught me to use, at the projects that kept my hands busy and my mind clear. Then I looked at my daughter, strong and smart and nothing like her mother, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. "Yeah," I said. "I think we are." We went upstairs to dinner, leaving the chandelier glowing softly in the darkness. Tomorrow I'd finish the wiring, test all the connections, make sure everything was working properly. But tonight, it was enough to know that the lights were on, the current was flowing, and everything was exactly as it should be.